This is going to be a brief summary about synovial joints. They can also be called diarthrosis, which means movable joints. They can be defined as connections between skeletal components where the articulating bones are separated by a fluid-containing joint cavity. The fluid-containing joint cavity is the most important feature of the synovial joints, by which we can decide if this is a synovial joint or another joint. So, as a fact to remember, all synovial joints are freely movable. They have 5 general structures, 5 key general structures, and they are the synovial cavity, which is the most important one, then the articular cartilage, which is hyaline, and this cartilage prevents friction. Then we have the articular capsule, which consists of a synovial membrane and a fibrous membrane. Then we have the synovial fluid, which is contained inside the synovial cavity. And we have the ligaments to prevent excess movements. As another fact, the knee joints have ligaments both inside and outside the joint. Now we have the range of motion. We have 4 range of motion. Firstly, the non-axial, which is the plane joint. Uniaxial means movement in one plane. And the joints that are uniaxial are the hinge and pivot. Then we have the biaxial, which means the joint can move in 2 planes, like the saddle and condyloid joints. And lastly, we have the multi-axial joint, which can move in all 3 planes, like the ball and socket joints. Now we have the types of joints of synovial joints, and they are based on shape of the articular surface. So we have 6 types. Firstly, the plane joints. They allow sliding movement, and they can be defined as one bone moves across the surface of another. The only example of this type of joint is the acromioclavicular joint. Then we have the hinge joints. They allow movement around one axis, which means uniaxial, that passes transversely through the joint, and it permits flexion and extension. They can be defined as cylindrical projections of one bone that fits into a true-shaped surface on another. Example, the elbow joint, the knee joint, the interphalangeal joints. Then we have the pivot joints. They allow movement around one axis that passes longitudinally along the shaft of bone. They permit rotation, and they can be defined as a rounded end of one bone protrudes into a ring composed of bone and possibly ligaments of another. Examples are the joint between the axis endens and the proximal radio-ulnar joint. Next, we have the condyloid joints, which can be called ellipsoid joints. They allow movement around 2 axes, so they are biaxial, that are at right angles to each other. They permit flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, and a limited circumduction. So they permit all angular motions. They can be defined as an oval articular surface of one bone that fits into a complementary depression in another. Examples are the wrist joints. They can be called radiocarpal joints, and the knuckle joints, which are the metacarpophalangeal joints or the MCP joints. Next, we have the saddle joints. They allow movement around two axes that are at right angles to each other. And each articular surface has a concave and a convex surface. They permit flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, and circumduction. And for examples, we have the CMC joint of the thumb, or it can be named as the carpometacarpal joint of the thumb. Lastly, we have the ball and socket joints, and they allow movement around multiple axes. They are the only multi-axial joint. They permit the most freely moving synovial joints, flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, circumduction, and rotation. The examples are the shoulder joint and the hip joint.